Welcome back to Refactoring Paleo Rose, where we take a 20-year-old Mac app and modernize it. My name is Tom. If you remember last time, I was concerned that saving documents wouldn't work just yet. And testing that, I found that it's actually true. It does not save the files correctly. There's a lot of complicated reasons for that, but one of the things I want to make sure we do is go through and find out what's working and what's not working when it comes to saving files. But to be able to do that, we have to have all the layer creation working. And it turns out vector layers is not working right now. Let's get that fixed. And once we have that fixed, we can start going through the process of fixing saving. So what's wrong with vectors? Take a look. Okay, here we are in Paleo Rose and Xcode. I mentioned that what we're trying to figure out is why the add vector layer isn't working. So let's try it. It's doing nothing, which is not what I would expect. Now, this particular document window is being controlled by a class called the Xrose window controller. So let's go to the window controller, and we know that these are toolbar items. So let's see if we can find that in the window controller. Actually, let's look for the text. Okay, so here we are with toolbar identifier items, this particular method, and inside we have add vector layer. And we're setting that in this code, the name and what the target is and what the action is. So it's a layers table controller display sheet for vstat layer. That's a mouthful, so let's go there. So here we are. Well, that's the primary reason why something wouldn't work is that it's commented out. So let's comment that back in and see what's wrong with it. These two lines are commented out. So I'm going to there. And I just want to get that correct. We see that there's an error. This create panel controller is not available. So if we check it over our file list just to see what we got, that's an Objective-C file. So we want to make sure that's in the bridging header. There it is. Both of those are the same file. I'm not sure why it's coming up twice. For that, go back. And we solve that problem. But we end up with some new ones. So we have some issues where we have some things that are optional. So this is expecting a non-optional window. And we have a optional window here. So we can go ahead and get this corrected. So we want the panel controller, our panel controller. Then we can let panel window equals panel controller window. And we can just set that there. And that solves that problem. So this whole thing will only happen as if we have this window. We also have this problem with this optional string. Let's go ahead and make that a guard. And that solves that problem. Before we move on, I'm going to take a look at this panel controller real quick. This will probably work, but I want to modernize it a bit. So let's use a more modern technique. It's a little bit more lengthy, but should be fine. let's go back and let's run it and see if we fix the problem. Let's add a vector layer. We now have the sheet. Sheet's working. It's picking the parent layer as tests, so that's the only layer that will work on. And let's hit, well, I'll make a comment here that this layout isn't that great yet. I'll fix it at some future time. I'm not convinced we'll even keep this screen, so I'm not going to worry about it. I just want to get it working. So let's hit create and see what happens. It's failing, and I can't even close this now. So what's the problem here? Let's take a look at the memory debugger. What I'm doing is I'm searching this list of all the objects that are in memory right now. So it gives us an idea of how many XR datasets are available. There's 2. Geometry inspectors, there's 2. And so on. Now, aside, there may be some issues in terms of memory here. One thing I'm quite aware of is that the panel controller isn't in the list. So the view came up, it's showing up, but it lost its view controller. It can't make that connection that we're expecting. So what's going on there? Kind of the weird thing about setting up these particular style of showing views is that this begin sheet doesn't necessarily hold on to the panel controller, which is a bit weird. Let's go ahead and make sure we're holding on to that panel controller. So the first thing we want to do is let the class that we're using hold on to it. So let's go to the top. And we're going to add a private variable called sheet controller. It's going to be an NS window controller. And it's going to be optional. In theory, this variable is reusable for any sheet we'll show. We don't want it to be weak, because if we make it weak, it will lose the controller again, just like we're losing it now. But it needs to be optional so that we can remove it by just passing a nil to it. Let's go back down to our function, our method. Now we can go ahead, if we want to, be a little bit paranoid and make that nil before we start. Really shouldn't make a difference. And then when we leave this, we also want to make it nil. Oops. We want to be able to make sure that we get rid of the sheet controller no matter what happens. But we'll have to do a little bit of finagling if we want to make sure it actually gets reset to nil on this completion. So let's do this. Let's make sure we have self first. Because we can't do anything if we don't have self. And at this point, let's go ahead and do a defer. And then we can get rid of that as well. Okay, so what we've done here is we made sure we had self. If we have self and we exit out of this method, we want to set the sheet controller to nil. So if we have to return here, let's go ahead and set it to nil. If we have to return there, set it to nil. If we complete, set it to nil. We have the sheet controller being set to nil, but as of yet, we haven't actually set the sheet controller. So let's do that. All right, we've now created the panel controller here, and now we set it to the sheet controller so that we hold on to it. And over here, we set it to get rid of it. So let's run it. And create. And there it is. Now, the question I have is, did we actually successfully get rid of that memory? Okay, we no longer have that panel or in that window controller. So successfully, we deferred that deletion of that controller, and now it's gone. Now, there's a little bit of cleanup we could theoretically do just to make it a little bit nicer. Don't quite like that. I'm not going to worry about it. These line length things are sometimes a problem, but it is just a style issue and not a code issue. So we've got this working now. So the next step is to move forward and start working on being able to save the file again. But that'll have to wait until next time. So if you like this, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.